I did see something that I think would be hilarious for Dorky though. So when VTubers do their meet and greets when you guys know Dorky, very popular VTuber, when they do their meet and greets at TwitchCon, they have like these little, it's like giant tablets, I guess, with like their VTuber avatar on it, so people can walk up to the screen and like talk to their favorite V. Have you guys seen that before? Or heard of it?
Exactly what you mean, yeah.
I just think it would be so funny to picture a meet and greet at like BlizzCon with Dorky's VTuber avatar, and there's these line of people that walk up, and they just walk up to the cat on the screen, and then he just goes, "Hey," or something like that.
Yo.
What conversation? What conversation do they have with Dorky in front of him?
You're welcome for getting to meet me.
I mean, hey, I get to see my fans. That's the important part, right?
Oh, we're live. All right, Dorky, load up. Yeah.
All right. Welcome everybody to the second episode of PoddyC with me, Dorky B, the one and only. You guys already know who it is. Dratnos. Who the hell are you?
True.
Wow.
No. I'm saying, introduce yourself. Talk, Dratnos.
Oh yeah, okay. What up, Dorky? How's it been going?
Good. Max?
Hello. Yeah, it's going good. Oh, they're saying they hear the echo again. Did we just
God
talk
damn
about
it.
this? How did I turn? Okay,
I'm
so
not
we figured it.
Echo yet.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not Echo.
Yeah. Yet. We looked at it last week, and we looked at it again today. So apparently it's my headphones. So I need to like get some new headphones for this. It like leaks out the side. So like if I am like this, like and they're talking, you will hear them from.
Do not turn your head.
Well, also you're talking louder than you were before, so I'm just going to turn you down a little bit because you're using your speaker presentation voice.
I'll be quiet. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Also, we have today we wanted Dorky to do the intro. So what do you guys think about what did you guys think about Dorky's intro? Seems pretty professional. I feel like pretty naturally Dratnos or I would do it, but I feel like Dorky kind of nailed it, you know.
All
no
that.
notes. He said, "Dratnos, who are you?" or something like that. Very, very professional.
I think that was good. Yeah.
Yep. So, what have you guys been up to the last week, Dorky? It's kind of near the end of the season.
Yeah, I've just been playing Mad Dark Souls. Retail is so dead for me right now. It's actually insane. I haven't been keeping up. People are like, "What is the title cutoff?" I don't know. Am I fine with my title cutoff? I don't know. Can you sell me some keys? No. And people are just asking about, like, everyone's just caring about the meta right now. Everyone wants to know what is the meta. They want to prepare for next season. They suffered a lot this season. They don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I've just been playing Dark Souls. I beat Dark Souls 3. I beat Sekiro last week.
Wait, you did Elden Ring? So I watched you do the end of Elden Ring. So you've done Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro. You're just like doing the FromSoft gauntlet.
Oh yeah, it's been a blast.
Which one was your favorite?
Sekiro.
Yeah, that
I
game
hate
is
to
like
say it.
perfect combat. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually so fun. I mean, like, I really want to say Elden Ring just because, like, it was such a good experience. It was the journey. I loved it. But Sekiro was, like, it was visceral. It was fun. I enjoyed the entire way through.
What was the... Sorry, we got Dratnos?
I was Elden Ring for me. That game is so good. The just like the freedom of it, the huge world. I did that one first, and then I went to the other ones, and the like dungeon crawly level design. I was a lot less a fan of than the
I
other
know
worlds.
exactly what you beat. I said that, and I pissed off a lot of my chat.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you beat.
Dude, if you ever want to piss off the Dark Souls community, just say that Dark Souls 2 is your favorite Dark Souls and just don't elaborate on that at all, because that one's like kind of universally panned as like one of the worst ones, and it'll get them very good. I think Bloodborne and Sekiro were the two that I liked the most. But which one did you spend like the most amount of time? Like, was there a boss in any of those games that just absolutely farmed you?
Oh, it was just Elden Ring, Millennia, and Renala actually took a long time. I mentioned this last time to you, Bex.
Yeah.
For some reason, that boss just did not click to
Dude.
me. But like, for some reason, Sekiro was so easy for me. Like, everyone was saying like that game was like so hard, but like I just went in there. I like spammed attack, spam parry. I was sprinting nonstop. I was beating the hell out of every boss. That was fun.
For For me, it was Godskin Noble and Godskin Duo.
Dude,
That-
okay.
Oh,
Apparently,
dude,
he one-shot the Godskin Duo. That's what,
No way.
Yeah.
Dude,
Which
it
is
was-
like,
Oh, dude.
yeah. So that's
I randomly walked into the room too. I didn't even know it was a boss fight.
that is
Yeah, that's all
okay.
the Elden Ring
But
rooms,
here's
you
the
just
thing that
walk
I don't
in and it's a
understand about
boss
Dorki.
fight.
Like, we'll move on from the whole FromSoft thing, but this I've never met or heard of anyone that struggled with Renala more than any other boss, and then also walked into the Godskin Duo room on accident and one-shot it. That makes absolutely no sense. Like, Renala, I think, was the easiest, like, main story boss for me. See, that's so strange.
It's because I think it plays too passive. Like the idea behind her is like you're supposed to go up her and beat her ass, but like I was just getting bombarded nonstop with spells, and I'm like, oh, how do I dodge this? I gotta dodge that. I gotta dodge that. I wasn't like going in. That was my mistake.
What about you, Dratnos? What have you done for the past little bit? I know you were gone for the past couple days.
Yeah,
right?
I've been catching up on like, chores and like seeing the family before, because it's gonna be BlizzCon and then Race to World first, and that's like that's gonna be the next month or whatever, busy. So I've kind of been doing everything else, getting all my stuff in order.
Yeah, it is kind of a crazy couple weeks. Because like you have TwitchCon, or I had TwitchCon this last weekend. And then BlizzCon is the weekend after that, and then it's so close to the race that the raiders that are flying in from BlizzCon are just staying in LA until the race starts. So it's like you're doing that, and then it's a patch, and then it's the race. I can't really think. I'm really excited for it. Like, it's really hype, but it's also like there's just so much going on at one time for sure.
You guys are real busy, man.
It's felt like there were like 3 months of just absolutely nothing, and now there's going to be like 1 month with 3 different things just smashed together. So
Yep.
I don't know. I kind of enjoy this cadence though. I like going hard and then chilling and then going hard versus kind of constant difficulty.
Constant hard.
Well, that's the good thing about
One of
like the
those
WoW
guys.
seasons now, kinda, but you can kind of get into that later. So I went to TwitchCon. Dratnos, you were not at TwitchCon this year. I think last year.
I skipped this one. Yeah, I would have if it wasn't so close to BlizzCon, but I decided to go BlizzCon instead and kind of chill this weekend.
Wait,
Hey,
you
guys,
live close to Adrenals?
I'm reasonably close to this one. Yeah, like I could have made it over, but how was it though? It was in Vegas this year. Was that
It was
that-
pretty
was that
wild.
cool?
Yeah, I missed seeing you there because we had a liquid party last year, and Dratnos was absolutely hammered.
Oh yeah.
He was like, I don't know, Dratnos when he's hammered, for whatever reason in my mind I had pictured it like, because some people are like really different when they're drunk, like they're just like violent or like really mean. Dratnos is not a mean person, so I was expecting that, but he's just like his normal self times 1,000. Very smiley, very intense, like just very happy. It's like he gets extra happy. It was a treat to witness.
Yeah, the structural integrity I kind of lose as well, and just sort of slinky down the chair. That's my
Structural
main bit.
Oh
Yeah.
my god. Okay, yeah. This year was pretty cool that it was in Vegas. So I experienced a lot of highs and lows. So one high was that this year, I think I had crossed a threshold into like, I guess, important enough at Twitch to kind of get some cool treatment. So I got like, I think it was like probably like the top 50 or 100 creators or something. They like shuttle you from this like hospitality suite in a hotel in like a black sedan, like directly under the convention center. And then they like Mr. President you through the building with security, like all behind closed doors into these like private lounges and stuff. So it was like kind of cool. I've never experienced anything like that before. And it was like really surreal and different. And that was the highs, but I experienced such low lows. Well, I guess, okay, before the end of that, I did like a meet and greet, and it was my first real meet and greet I ever did, and I was low-key terrified because, I don't know, like, I'm just walking up to it just being like, man, my ego could be about to take a major hit if this does not go
That
well.
is terrifying.
Like, yeah, they had me signed up for like a super long meet and greet or whatever, so I'm like, oh my god, if no one's here. And then there was way more people than I expected, and people were happy to meet me. And there was this girl who gave me like a personally made like wristband that said like world first fire rack on it, and that's super sick. I'm gonna wear that until the race. And then a lot of them were just like either lurkers or chatters, and they were like really happy to see me, which I was really happy about that, because there's not a lot of WoW fans at TwitchCon. It's more like the celebrity influencer following, like the OTVs, the OTKs. It's the Minecraft community. It's the Apex community. There's some communities that don't really go. WoW is one of them. And then on top of that, there's BlizzCon in 2 weeks. So if you're going to go to a convention, it's not going to be TwitchCon, right? So I was just like, all signs are bad. This is going to be terrible. And then it wasn't that bad. But then I did have kind of a bad experience, though. So I had like a sponsor meet and greet the next day. And it wasn't on the TwitchCon schedule. It was kind of in like a tucked away thing in the edge of one of the convention centers. And it was me and this other creator, and it was on a day. It was the last day, and like it was so expensive this year that like people didn't buy 3-day passes. They bought like the 1-day pass for Friday or Saturday, and then just hung out in Vegas. So there was very little people at the convention. There's not a lot of WoW fans, and we were like kind of tucked away. So I'm doing this 2-hour meet and greet, and we're like at a table in front of the booth for this company, and like basically the only people who came up to us over a 2-hour period were just people who wanted help, like we were a like help desk or something.
Oh no,
it was so bad. It was so bad. Like this company was giving away like this big scooter and like a couple other things, and you'd see people walking up and you could tell that they were gonna ask about the scooter, and they were just like coming up, and you're thinking like, oh, do you like want to sign anything, or do you want one of these like things we're giving away? And they're just like, do you guys know anything about the scooter? It was so bad, man. And I was just, that whole 2 hours just like absolutely ruined me. I was like, I'm so happy that I had a good meet and greet the previous day, but that was just tragic. Yeah, that was not good.
That would have been good if you streamed it.
That would have been absolutely oh, and another part of this, the person who was running this booth had like a hype man. So like they were on the mic being like, and today at the partner booth, you could meet Maximum and these other people, and then people are walking by listening to this person hype it up, and no one cared. Oh my God, it was bad. But then I did see something that I think would be hilarious for Dorki though. So when VTubers do their meet and greets when you guys know Dorki, very popular VTuber, when they do their meet and greets at TwitchCon, they have like these little it's like giant tablets, I guess, with like their VTuber avatar on it, so people can walk up to the screen and like talk to their favorite V. Have you guys seen that before? Or heard of it?
Exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know exactly.
Cool.
Wait, have
Yeah,
you
I hope
done
to do
that?
that one day. Yeah. No.
But I just,
cool.
for whatever, you don't know, like people think it's cringe. I think it's pretty, like, you just see a big line of people like walking up these things, and they walk away like super happy. So obviously it means a lot to them. But I just think it would be so funny to picture a meet and greet at like BlizzCon with Dorki's VTuber avatar, and there's these line of people that walk up, and they just walk up to the cat on the screen, and then he just goes, "Hey," or something like that.
Yo.
What conversation? What conversation do they have with Dorki in front of him?
You're welcome for getting to meet me.
I mean, hey, I get to see my fans. That's the important part, right?
Bro, I would pay so much money to just watch that. That'd be like a comedy skit, man.
So
God
are the
damn it.
VTubers like there behind the screen, or are they just at home?
Oh no, they're home. I think. Well, a lot of the VTubers do go there, but they're anonymous and they have parties. But I think some of them are there and some of them are home. But
okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
probably like 50-50.
man, I don't know. I thought that'd be so funny. Anyways, enough about TwitchCon. It was an interesting experience. I'm unfortunate I didn't get to see drunk Dratnos this year, but hopefully in a few weeks at
next
BlizzCon.
year.
Well, I'll probably see.
That. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple weeks. And Dorki, you are going to BlizzCon, right? Just undercover.
No, but you can think that, I guess. I mean, people wouldn't know.
Yeah,
I
good
feel like if
cover.
you ever talk to someone, they would know. Like, it'd be pretty. Like, if you ever talked to me in real life, I would instantly know it was you.
Nah, that is just my online voice. You know, like it's just me speaking really close to the mic. It's like if I speak further from the mic, I probably wouldn't sound the same. Or if you heard me in real life, it'd probably be very different, right?
Yeah, maybe. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, who knows? And then also you could use the screen idea where you would meet your fans. You could use that same thing to like cast races, because like casting races is such free money, because like you can just cast during your non-raid or play times and then stream outside of it.
I would love to, but they do not hire JPEGs apparently.
But they should. They should just have the
yeah.
couch and then you having like your cat avatar on a tablet
Exactly.
and then talking on the broadcast.
Dude, it'd be
Okay,
like
I mean,
those
okay,
little like
that's not funny,
segues with the iPad on it that just kind of roll
God damn it.
around. Yeah.
Holy shit. like Dorky and Growl are a casting duo for one of the races, and they just bring out these giant tablets or cardboard cutouts with the fucking
Bro,
mics.
we'd be banger casters, Vo.
Yeah, you would. You actually would be really good.
Hey, exactly.
So, yeah. All right. So we have a couple things we want to talk about today, and we do have a banger Patreon question at the end of the episode, so make sure you guys stick around for that. But yeah, we're kind of... The goal of today is to ask the question of, just to give you guys a little bit of scheduling stuff, we're actually planning in the next few weeks, we're doing like a full Mythic Plus, like looking forward to 10.2 Mythic Plus, and also potentially expansion-wise. Like, what are you looking for in Mythic Plus in the future? And we're going to have a very special guest for that, and a lot of you guys know this person and are fans. And then we're going to do one for the upcoming, and then the week after that will be right before the race, right? And I will be able to take like an hour or two out of my day on probably Wednesday of that week to... talk about the upcoming race and the upcoming raid, do a bunch of content around the raid. But this weekend, it's actually going to be, because we're not doing, the one next week is going to be Mythic Plus, this is going to be what you're expecting from the announcements for Retail WoW at Blizzcon. So what do you want to see? If you could design your slide that they introduce, not necessarily the name of it, you know, but just like, what kind of things are you looking for in expansion? What do you think would pop off in this game? Them bringing stuff back, or them adding things? Like, what do you want to see? So I guess I'll leave that to either of you two to start it off, and certainly what we'll get into today as well is kind of the expansion direction of WoW, and kind of compare and contrast the recent ones to see what direction we want to go.
Ooh, okay, so I feel like I have so many different topics I would like to cover, but I'm just going to shoot out random ideas, and then you guys let me know. So one of them was 10-man rating. I feel like if Ian Hazakostas just showed up on stage on BlizzCon, and he was like, guys, in Return of the Void, we will bring back 10-man rating. I feel like everyone's going to be like, yeah, let's freaking go. It's going to be so hype. And, well, what do you guys think? I feel like it would be a very cool idea.
I'll let Dratnos go. I'm pretty opinionated on this.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, for me, Mythic 20 is a great size for the hardest difficulty in the game. Like, I really like that. And compared to, I did 10 ran back in Wrath the first time. So I have played both. I played 10 and 25 back the first time in Wrath. There's something special about that larger size that I think 10 is like a different experience. What I think there is space for in the game is something that's slightly easier than Mythic, but substantially harder than current Heroic. That could be either 10 or flex sized. But I don't think I would want to see the hardest difficulty in the game changed to 10. 10 alongside 20 seems like a lot of work. They've kind of tried that back in Wrath and Kata, right? Like, that was sort of the whole thing they were going for, and they kind of struggled making the difficulties balanced, and then having them be unbalanced intentionally, and then trying to make them balanced again, and it never really sort of fit. So I don't know. I'd be open to some way of introducing 10, but I would hope it wouldn't cut 20 as the like main Mythic mode.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I think oh, sorry, go ahead, Dorky.
I'll just say super quick. Like, I don't know if it would work if it was a separate difficulty for sure, because that was the part of the problem with it in the past, where it was just like side content, or it was like, you know, not the premier form of rating. But yeah, that was all I was gonna say.
Well, see, the whole how many difficulties in this game makes sense. We can actually discuss that too. I think that's really interesting. But I largely agree with Dratnos. Oftentimes when you give opinions and stuff, it gets like generalized as like you think this is good for the game. I think them going to 10-man rating would be like a nightmare for me, because I feel like the myth if that became Mythic, like 20-man Mythic is gone, everything else stays the same, and Mythic is just now 10-man. I don't think rating would ever be the same. I think rating kind of makes the most sense for 20 in this game. And it kind of would lower the integrity of rating, especially looking at how 10-mans used to work back in the day. But that doesn't mean that I don't think it might not be better for the game, like for the majority of the game. Like, if you're making a game in 2023, which will be in 2024 when this expansion comes out, if you were to, like, you would not make 20-man as your ideal content raid size if you're making a new game. So that makes me think that like you would try to go for something smaller for people to interact with it, because really the barrier of entry in raiding is a lot of things. There's like the Mythic Lockout and stuff. You can go into other ways to solve the rating accessibility problem besides making it 10-man. But yeah, I don't know. I would hate to see that happen just because I think raiding would never be the same level of challenge and good content it is now. But I know that there are so many people out there that love doing Mythic Plus, if not for the reason that it is just easier to find 4 people that have similar skill to you and have similar aspirations and time availability than it is 20. And that's the main driver, right? Is just people just have friend groups that they want to play with, and 10-mans are just so much easier to do that. And like you said, I will say one thing about Dorky's suggestion. As much as I personally wouldn't be a fan of it, if they announce the expansion and they put on their slide 10-man Mythic is 10-man is the new Mythic difficulty, or 10-man is coming back, or whatever, I don't know if there's another announcement they could make that would make that place roar louder than that. I really feel like that is what people want to hear, maybe more than anything else. So maybe you're onto something.
Yeah, so here's how I see it. Like, 20-man rating, it has to stay. I don't think 10-man rating is actually going to happen. It's just like me shooting my shit. But like, the way I see it, the game is way too structured around 20-mans currently. You've already developed a player base that's used to 20-man rating. They have guilds and communities around 20-man rating. We have raid buffs. We have how many specs? Like almost 40 specs now, like some 30-something amounts.
39, yeah.
Yeah, 39 is like way too many. And the game is just built around 20-man rating. But I do feel like it's been a detriment to the game. There are a lot of people who cannot fill their roster. They find it way too hard logistically to actually raid. And it would probably bring in like a whole new wave of players, but at the same time, it kind of is hard to do at the moment. It's kind of like the whole solo queue and plus idea that we've talked about, or it's kind of like how people complained back in RAF, right? Like, didn't RAF bring in a ton of new players that were the RAF babies, and it also alienated a lot of what people originally loved about WoW? So that's kind of how I see 10-man rating. I completely agree with you where, like you were saying, it's gonna cause a lot of fans who haven't been playing the game to be like really hyped for the game, but I just don't really see it happening.
Well, so I want to kind of segue in 10-man to something that people would bring up initially. So Dratnos brought up the idea of like, oh, maybe it's like a difficulty in between heroic and mythic, and I actually don't think that that's the worst idea. I think there's this stigma around the amount of difficulties that I want to talk about in a second, but there is actually such a massive gap between heroic and mythic in difficulty level that there could be something in the middle. But I've heard this, people have said this a lot. There's too many difficulties in WoW. It's too confusing. And I've really never understood any of these takes, and I wonder if you guys have a more nuanced answer to this than how I understand it. Like, I've heard people be like, there's no reason for LFR. There's no reason for LFR. Dude, actually, I saw this at TwitchCon this last weekend. People who love raiding and love WoW, raiding like isn't really their thing, and they'll just do LFR to like see the story and stuff. And I see no way how that negatively affects anyone that primarily does high mythic plus, mythic progression, or heroic or normal. Like, it doesn't take anything away from those people, and it only helps a certain group of people see the raid content. So I guess I'm just, do you guys understand the there are too many difficulties in WoW argument? Or
I understand it. Like, the way I view it is that there doesn't feel like there's anything behind these other difficulties because they don't reward the same, which, like, obviously the harder one is going to reward more. So, like, it just feels like it's not meaningful content. Like, yeah, it lets players see the raid and whatever the content has to offer, but you don't get to actually accomplish something out of, say, completing heroic. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of AOTC guilds that are like, oh, you know, I get a lot out of clearing heroic, but there are many players, especially players who used to play classic. They're probably like the more vocal majority of the ones who are complaining about this, is that you don't really get a sense of fulfillment from completing either normal or heroic, and LFR too, especially. That's sort of how I see it.
I think you get some people doing like the delete LFR bit just kind of as a like screw casual players thing.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
I think there's also some element of like, there have been tiers where if you're a mythic raider, you're expected to clear LFR and normal and heroic and do Mythic Brog in the same reset for the first like several resets. I remember Sepulcher, we did LFR splits on the like third week because we needed to get
that's
4-piece.
horrible.
And
Yeah.
so the existence of those lower difficulties does mean that there are some cases where the higher end players do have to go into them a lot. And even now, like, you know, we're all going to be doing some amount of normal and heroic probably, or at least heroic in the first few weeks of next patch, which, you know, maybe in an ideal world, you would only be able to progress one difficulty in some way. And kind of that would be maybe a better experience, right? When you think about other games, it's not like you play through Elden Ring on very easy and then normal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then
Correct.
hard,
Yeah,
right?
that argument I do get is like there's only one, and it's like you have to kind of go up through the ranks. The whole like having to do LFR normal and heroic thing, you kind of don't. Like I can say from like we do like the highest level gear farming possible, right? And like I don't think we've ever done LFR runs as a guild, right?
Yeah, well,
So-
you guys don't need the LFR because you guys have so many. Like
Yeah.
when we look at like the last few tiers, we've gone into LFR. My guild has because we don't have as many splits to get like Chromatic Essence.
Yeah,
or
but in a
Whispering
way, isn't
Incarnate
that
Icon
good
per
though?
tier.
Because now you have access to gear. You have an avenue to get gear that you otherwise wouldn't. Like in the scenario where LFR is removed, would that actually be better for you? Or even in the most extreme case, someone who's like way less progressed than even, you know what I mean? Like or doing less splits or zero. Like I feel like it only helps, right?
Our power would go down, but the fact that it's optimal for us to go into LFR, I think, is a pretty frustrating.
Okay.
Like whenever that is the optimal thing to do, we're not happy about it. Like we'll do it. We'll take the power. Obviously, it's better for us that we do than we don't. But I think we would prefer to play a game where that wasn't something that we.
No, I
felt
mean for
incentivized
sure.
to do.
Like for example, you could make the most extreme argument and be like, oh well, pet battles give you a
Right.
really low chance at tier. So it's like, don't you want pet battles because you have the chance to actually get tier when you otherwise wouldn't? And then it's like, no, because I hate pet battling and I don't want to pet battle all day. And so yeah, I get what you're saying. You like doing something really not fun and unchallenging, like monotonous content just to get some level of gear is not good. Yeah, I understand.
The fact that it closes the gap a little bit between, you know, an 8-split guild and a 2-split guild or whatever maybe is some upside, but I think it's still more bad than good anytime we have to go into LFR. But I think that if you look at LFR and you think, oh, that's the only thing it's doing, obviously you're missing the point because, like you said, there are so many people that engage with the raids only through LFR. Like, if we looked at all the difficulties, that's probably the best one in terms of getting people to see the content. So if anything would go, I don't think it would be LFR. I do see that, like, if you went from 4 difficulties to 5, and like, how are you going to fit its item level rewards in, and how are you going to avoid further bloating the kind of weekly content that people have to do? I could see that being a legitimate big challenge with this if you tried to do it that way.
Yeah, sorry, I have like my phone going off. Suki's trying to handle something for me with my phone right now. Yeah, I also just random thing about pet battles that I remember. Do you guys remember when they nerfed Soar in the open world in the beta because they said that it would be unfair to transmog farmers and
I
pet
remember
battlers
that,
for
yeah.
Soar to exist in the open world? Sorry, I just feel like we can't let that be lost to history and have to at least do our due diligence of making sure that people remember that they did that. So very
Okay,
good.
all right. You know, I don't think the logic behind that nerf was that bad, but I do think they should go back now and be like, all right, we're enabling Dragonriding in the old world. You know what we're going to do? We're going to buff Soar. Soar is going to be full speed. It's just going to be a full Dragonriding mount. If you press Soar, you're just on a Dragonriding mount now, and you can actually just use that as your Dragonriding mount if you're an evoker. Like, it's
I think
such a
the
sad
issue,
button.
The issue was more like a who asked thing. Like
Yeah.
the amount of pet battlers and transmog farmers that were just like, oh well, this just isn't fair. Like just no, absolutely no one said that. But yeah, yeah. So I think bringing it back to BlizzCon, we have a couple things to look forward to. So we talk about 10-man rating. We can probably do, man, if they announce this, we could do an entire infinitely long, more nuanced discussion of that. But that's one. Dratnos, do you have anything that you just are positive that you want to see on that slide?
I want to bring us to talk about the kind of main thesis thing that we started with here, which was or that we wrote down for this, which is like borrowed power as an expansion philosophy, which we saw that go away in Dragonflight, right? Dragonflight is our first expansion without a kind of borrowed power feature creep buff player power going up over the course of the expansion. We're getting like a little bit in 10.2, and obviously it's not confirmed that there won't be a 10.3, but we strongly suspect it. And in 10.2, we're getting like a helmet enchant in the second month or something like that, but otherwise it's basically nothing in the scale of conduits, essences, legendaries, all these sorts of power creep things that sort of got added onto over the course of the expansion that made our guys more powerful and play differently. And I think the really interesting question is, like, okay, that kind of worked for one expansion. Is that actually a good long-term way for the next expansion to operate, right? Like, if we go into a new expansion and our classes are just, like, are they going to add another row of talents or something? Is that going to be sustainable if they do that? Or are we going to have to, because we saw what happened with the old talent trees when they kept doing that. That got very unwieldy by the, even by Wrath. So I feel like they've kind of backed themselves into a corner here where it's going to be very hard for them to not return to some kind of other way of making our characters feel different than last expansion and also making them feel better over the course of the expansion.
Yeah. So, like, go ahead, Dorky. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. I fear that next expansion is going to become Dragonflight 2.0, which, I mean, like, might not necessarily be a bad thing. Like, I did thoroughly enjoy Dragonflight thus far, but I do worry that it'll be too samey, too formulaic. Like, what exactly is going to happen next expansion? Are we bringing back Brawler powers where our characters change? Are we getting more Evergreen systems? Because the nature behind Evergreen systems is they can't be too complicated, they can't be too tied to a grind. And as you said, like, if they expand on a tree, then like what happens afterwards? Do we just keep expanding it? Because in that case, the game becomes too much like PoE, which is, you know, not exactly the worst thing. Like, I remember we talked about this once before, like, between me and Max and I forgot who else. I mentioned that, like, what if they just continued with, like, whatever powers that we got from BFA? Like, what if we just have Azurites and Essences and Corruption right now on top of our talents? Like, that'd be crazy. Well, I mean, on one hand, that'd be crazy fun, right? Like, we get to customize our character like crazy.
Yeah.
We get to, like, have all these different synergy between all our systems on our character. Like, that sounds cool as hell, but at the same time, that might just be too much, especially for World of Warcraft.
Yeah, so I think you're on. I think you're onto something big. If you can, Fronk, swap over to my POV. I can make a nice little graph of how I think these expansions have gone to kind of give some context to this, and then let's see if we can find a nice middle ground. So basically, the thing that and again, for people who are just listening to this, I'll try to like visualize this as best as I can. But this will be like on the YouTube and Twitch versions of this. There will be like a graph on the screen kind of explaining it. So you have like the two colors here for Dragonflight, which is like the, the consistent Evergreen, and then the three like big borrowed power expansions in BFA, Legion, and Shadowlands. There, when you look at like expansion quality versus timeline of expansion, the main thing with the other ones that we had previous to Dragonflight is they started out so bad, just all of them deeply, deeply flawed. And generally speaking, just went up and went all the way through. And then the downside of this is at the start of next expansion, you went all the way back to the beginning, right? You just got done finally figuring out Legion artifact weapons and all that stuff. And then by the time BFA started, you had to lose tier, legendaries, your artifact weapon, all of these systems, all of that you've taken 2 years to learn are gone, and now we're going to figure out untradeable, only one tier 1 Azurite, trade Azurite armor, right? And then you have to do that whole thing again, right? Now, where Dragonflight differed and what we're kind of looking for a... I don't know why that's doing this, but all good. Actually, I'll just leave it there. I don't know why that's.
What is
I don't know why that's great, but all good. And then
for
what
our audio-only listeners, Microsoft Paint is currently defeating Max.
Yeah, exactly. And what Dragonflight did is it started at a much higher quality than the last 3 borrowed power expansions did, but it didn't ramp that hard. It got better and better. New talent tree updates, a lot more things released throughout the expansion, everything, right? But it had one major problem, and that is that it did not reach the heights of what a BFA, Legion, and Shadowlands was able to achieve, right? The one problem of spending an entire expansion to build on this kind of thing is the ends were insane. The end of BFA, the end of Legion were
they're euphoric. Like, there's probably very few times in World of Warcraft where you could have compared anything to the last couple months, 6 months, or a year of that. Shadowlands is a little different, didn't end with as high of a peaks, but still had the similar problems at the beginning. So the question is, what do you think you want in an expansion? Is it possible where you can do let's do a green line here, where you do the Evergreen system that isn't like Dragonflight, or is like Dragonflight, but then near the end you spend a bunch of time getting the stuff you're focusing on correct, but then maybe you get a little weird with it, you know? You can make things like essences and corruption and things like that without artifact power. Those things could have existed on their own. They don't have to be together. So what kind of expansion do you guys want, is what I'm asking.
It's tough because a lot of the problems that cause those starts of the expansion to be so bad is because they really messed up at figuring out the acquisition for whatever system they would come up with, right? And there's no reason to think that that would necessarily be better if they came up with a new system mid-expansion, right? So if they drop if they drop some kind of new borrowed power on us on, like, say 11.2, 11.3 or whatever, would it actually be fun to acquire, or would they do the thing they always do and make it, like, way too hard, way too annoying to get at first, and then there is no end of expansion where it gets good, it's just bad and then gone. I think if they could avoid that problem, that would be the best way for expansions to look, though. Yeah, it'd be... I think if you have to choose, I do think starting strong is better than ending strong, though, because so many more people play the start of the expansions. Like,
correct.
And having a really bad time, I don't know, like at the start, versus a really nice but kind of boring end farm, because the end farm is always still like just a really long farm, right?
And it's the least played time of the expansion. I think you hit on that majorly. Like, the one thing I saw, there was some like kind of weird incorrect stats given around recently of like how many people are still raiding and throughout the expansion, stuff like that. But one thing you notice when you actually look at how many like boss kills there have been as a metric, like the beginning of every expansion, including really successful ones, is so massively higher at the beginning, which like obviously makes sense, that the whole process of the borrowed power thing, even though like the people who play WoW all year round, right, a lot of content creators, a lot of people who play the game and you guys hear from frequently, those people will never stop telling you how good the end of BFA and Legion was, but think about how little of the player base actually got to experience it because it took so long for it to be that good.
Yeah, so the real question here is, how would it look next expansion? Because like we saw this expansion, it started out strong, but like where would that line be for next expansion? Because technically we're going to be at where we are at the end of Dragonflight, right?
Correct.
Since it's Evergreen, we're carrying it over. Would that just mean like it's just going to be a flat line the entire way? And where do we go from there?
Well,
and also
sorry, finish your thought.
I was just saying, like, super quick, touching on what Dratnos said to like make it fun to acquire, like what exactly could they do to make it enjoyable? I just want to
before Dratnos answers that, I want to ask just on the Evergreen side, what do you guys think? This expansion, they tackled the new talent system, which will continue throughout the whole purpose of Evergreen. They tackled professions. I think mixed responses on professions. I've heard a lot of very positive and also like they didn't reach their ambitious goals kind of feelings about it. But like, what do you think? What is the Evergreen thing that, let's say they get all the talent trees reworked to the current standards of the last few reworks by the beginning of next expansion? They're kind of on pace for that. What do you think is the next thing they focus on? What are the things in this game that need a full revamp or like quality increase in this game?
Personally, I would like to see them bringing back something like glyphs. Glyphs were kind of a nice little addition to your character. I want to see a little bit something more on top of just talent as customization. Like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I thought glyphs were a perfect example of something that was like simple, but it added flavor to your character.
I do think there is something that the talent tree is missing, where there are these talents like the Demon Hunter ones where your sigil goes at cursor or goes at target versus goes at you, and they've had a really tough time like making these sorts of things, or the one where you fell rush back to where you came from when you press it next. These sorts of like weird modifications to abilities that aren't throughput increases. How do you make it so that those are like takeable? And I do think some sort of like glyph system would work for that, for those sorts of modifications to your abilities, those kind of customizations that aren't necessarily throughput increases but are just like quality of life modifications based on how you want to play your class. So that could be cool.
Yeah, I just, whenever I was thinking about them doing another Evergreen expansion, they're absolutely going to spend less time on talent trees next expansion than they did this time, for sure. So where are they going to spend that time, right? If you get professions mostly figured out, if you get talent trees mostly figured out, is it, which is kind of puts a lot of weight on like the whole rating and Mythic Plus thing. Like maybe really what they hunker down and focus on for Evergreen next expansion is like exactly what these game modes should look like in 2023, 2024, right? But it also could lead to them doing something like this when they have more time. Them creating essences and corruptions and stuff like that absolutely takes away from their ability to balance classes and talent trees and things like that. Like some ideal world that I kind of thought of was, you know, moving this over a little bit, would be doing like a, you know, you start out with the Dragonflight style Evergreen thing. Oh, it's not red. Being defeated by paint again. You do the small, getting better and getting better, getting better. Don't try too much. Don't try too hard at the beginning. Have the quality of the game just be high innately, very similar to Dragonflight. Dragonflight beginning absurdly better than the beginning of the previous 3 expansions. And then, I don't know. I think there's a world where the biggest thing about Borrowed Power that felt bad was this blue line. This amazing feeling to, and I think Dratnos, you talked about this before. What expansion was it where you hit like level?
Oh,
like,
dude. Yeah, BFA, there was this experience in BFA where every level you're losing so much haste and everything, but then also from level 115 to 116, your legendary turns off and you're just leveling, and at the start of leveling that first day, you're feeling so good in Zuldazar or whatever, and then like level 118, you're in Nazmir and you can barely 1v1 a zombie or something like that.
Yeah,
you're just sitting there like, I am in pain.
Yeah, like they turned off their tier or something before.
Yeah, it was the legendary that turned off mid-leveling.
Yeah, that turned off mid-leveling, and like you just felt like it's just the feeling of the previous day you were playing the game. Your character felt unbelievable. You have a million haste corruption. You have like essences. Your character just feels awesome. And then the next day you log in, and it's a new expansion. You're supposed to be excited, but the most important thing in WoW by far is the feeling of playing your character, and your characters just felt so much worse, and that was such a weird feeling for supposed to be excited about something. So maybe you, again, don't have as big of fall off, so maybe the big blue drop off you see there can look something like this. You know, you're going through, and then maybe in the last couple patches you do kind of go out of your way a little bit. Is some borrowed power at all good if the drop isn't down to the middle of the earth, it's just down to here when the next expansion starts, you know? Like, is there a world where you could spice up but then that kind of goes away from what you were saying earlier, where, you know, the important time to have the game right is at the beginning, but also that's when you can fuck it up the most, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It is a very delicate tightrope to walk if they want to go that way. I do think, though, that if we're in that world where they have like extra time to spend on something, you know, Borrowed Power sounds like, I mean, obviously like Raid and M Plus being, if they launched an expansion, it was like, this expansion, we're going to put all of our extra time into modernizing Raid and M Plus, I would be cheering from the rooftops, right? Like that's obviously, that would be great. Doing Borrowed Power as well, I think would also be great. If they don't do those things, I just hope that they don't pick something like Torghast or Warfronts to, you know, put their time into in a future expansion. Like those sorts of
Really?
like if they're gonna
So?
if they're gonna aim something at casual players, I hope that it actually lands and it can be something that'll actually be evergreen. Because both Torghast and Warfronts, I think, the goal was for them to be really popular and then make them sort of evergreen. At least Warfronts, I think the goal was to have more than just 2 of them. But it missed so hard that didn't happen. So if they want to spend the dev time on casual stuff, if they don't want to do the Raid and M Plus overhaul, which I would prefer, or do some Borrowed Power stuff, I would advocate for a really robust player housing system. I know that that's somewhat controversial. There's some people that think that wouldn't be good or wouldn't be fun, but I think if it was done well, that could be a really good thing that could be a nice evergreen system and could tie in with professions and raids and dungeons and everything, and could like revitalize that side of the game for a lot of people. So that would be my. I am not saying that's what I would want them to do. I'm saying if they don't want to choose Raid and M Plus or Borrowed Power system or something like that, then if they wanted to do some kind of casual system, I would much prefer that over another Torghast.
Yeah, player housing would be a banger. I don't fully agree with that though, because like as much as I would love them to continue working on Raid and M Plus and PvP, I mean I don't really care about PvP, but
yeah,
there are
I
a
don't
lot
care
of people
about
who love PvP. Yeah, PvP, oh my god, about. But I feel like the game has become too formulaic, and it could definitely use more content outside of those big three. Something like Mage Towers, we got to see return of Mage Towers. Have challenge modes as a separate content too. So like, if players want to do challenge modes, they can opt in for that. I thought Visions were fun. I thoroughly enjoyed Visions. Until they became a chore. They just need to make these content not a chore. And I felt like them coming out with Torghast for an entire expansion and then just completely scrapping it felt like a waste, really. Because like, I feel like Torghast could have been really good if they just continued working on it. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Like, I don't actually know if it would have been good. But Torghast could have been good. And they don't have to be a chore. Like, nobody sees Mage Tower as a chore. It was just like a one-time thing. It was aspirational content. It gave you cosmetics. It was not like tied to a weekly thing you had to do for
the Mage Tower has one of the highest approval ratings of anything they've ever done. And the craziest thing is it's actually challenging content, where most of the criticisms you hear about WoW are like, well, we don't want challenging content. We want it all kind of to be for free, right? But even that crowd is like, Mage Tower was the shit. Because and you're totally right about Torghast. I feel like that's something that's often missed from Torghast, is if it was just made where you didn't have to have your absolute weakest players have to do it every week for vertical progression, you immediately made it unable to be good, right? You like, if you have a roguelike that isn't challenging, there's no point of it being a roguelike, right? Like, roguelikes are supposed to be really challenging, and then that way when you get god tier roles, you feel like a god, and it actually matters because you're being a god over very difficult content rather than very trivial content where your roles don't matter. It ended up just being meaningless content. Like, they could have done Torghast and had it not be a chore, and it could have been like Mage Tower tier, one of the best things they've ever done in this game.
I think it was still pretty far from that, though, because like the power design was just so far from a roguelike. Like, roguelikes have this thing in them where if I have power A, then all of a sudden power B synergizes with that, and I'm going to change my pick. Whereas Torghast was just like, oh, I'm playing a Brewmaster. I see the Vivify, heal myself, kill everything, tap power. I click that.
It was not a well-made roguelike as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, it wasn't as simple as just change it. Like, that was a necessary but not sufficient thing that they had to do to make it fun, was remove the power integrations early on. But it was still like, as a very big roguelike enjoyer, I think it was still a long way away from being good. And they had such a big problem with it as well, where they had, at the time, 36 specs, each of which could choose 4 covenants, and they were trying to curate a power list for each of those. Like, every roguelike I know has like 2 classes to start, and then they add a 3rd and a 4th or whatever as they come out of early access. And having to curate a balanced set of powers for that many different builds was always going to be a Herculean undertaking if they were going to try and actually make it good.
Yeah, and I think you're both onto something. I don't have any opinion on the player housing thing. The only thing I'll say about that is if you're ever going to do player housing, they said in an interview it'd be such a robust and big thing that you'd have to lose like a full major season for it, a full Mythic Plus season or raid thing. But maybe that's a sign that it's happening, because it looks like we may lose a raid in Mythic Plus season at the end of this expansion.
I haven't seen them actually. I've heard other people say if it cost you a raid tier, would you still want it? I didn't actually know that was a Blizzard quote,
I'm
though.
almost certain that I heard a answer similar to that.
Okay.
But either way, because they always get asked. But it looks like we may be losing one of those tiers, so just something to keep your eye on. Again, player housing wouldn't be my thing. I see people compare it to Garrisons. It would obviously be infinitely different than
obviously
Garrisons.
If it was done
they're
like
not
Garrisons,
comparable. Yeah,
if
it was done by Garrisons, it would be trash. Yeah, and it would certainly, hopefully, not take a whole raid tier to do that. But the other thing, I feel like was something that is pretty core to all of this, and that is, that was one thing that I wanted to bring up, and you did it before. That was every single patch, there should be something like Withered Training Scenario, Visions. It doesn't have to be vertical progression. Mage Tower, a good Torghast. Like, I think you're totally right. Like, what you expect in a WoW season is a new PvP season, a new Mythic Plus season with some new dungeons now, and a new raid. And there's casual content, and then throughout the patch now, the 0.5s and 0.7s during the patch, they actually give more content. But I think there needs to be more major content as a avenue. I think every patch, you should expect something like all of those systems, because while they were tied to other borrowed power systems, they were kind of seen negatively because of that interaction. But as a standalone product, they were actually awesome. They don't really have to be tied to your character gaining power. They would be done because they were just awesome, right? And I think Mage Tower is a good example of that. So Dorky, at least for that point, I think you're definitely right.
Yeah, like I feel like it's extremely hard for them to hit. It's something because like on one hand you don't want it to be a chore, but on the other hand you want to make it meaningful. Because that's sort of the problem with Dragonflight content at the moment, at least for me. Like maybe I'm just speaking from a delusional high end point, but all of this content that gets released, like the 0.7 patches, like all this random stuff, I have zero interactions with. I've never touched it. I don't know what it is. Like, what do? They have like the feast thing. They have that. God, I don't even know what they're called. Like,
There's
that's how...
Dream Surges that came out in 10.1.7. There's the Time Rifts that came out in 10.1.5.
Yep.
But those don't give power. They just give cosmetics, and they're also not like challenging content like Visions or Torghast or anything.
Yeah, I literally do not know what they are. But when I think back in Legion, I think of Suramar. Suramar was cool. I think a lot of people really enjoyed Suramar and thought it was cool. And what else was there?
Am I alone in thinking the Withered training scenario from Suramar was like one of the coolest things? I
enjoyed it so much. Yep, that was cool as hell.
Yeah, that was like medium challenging, like pretty. I think that's the difference between that and stuff like Time Rifts, But I think the other difference is that you needed to do it for power, right? Like, if you didn't need to do Withered training or whatever for rep that mattered to unlock
you would have done it,
way,
wouldn't you?
Would you have? Are
you
you guys doing Time Rifts right now?
Like, here's what I think would happen. Like, would I have done it on my own if someone didn't say do this for power? I don't know, but I probably would have done it if someone else happened to do it and they were like, hey, this fucking rules. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what good content is, right? Like if something is universally good content, you'll hear about it and you will try it.
You guys done the Dragonriding races, the Eastern Kingdoms Cup, the challenge races?
I kind of want to do that.
No, actually,
I did the Kalimdor ones. The only problem with them is they aren't hard. Like you do like the hardest one and you gap it by like 5 seconds or something. They're just not a challenging version of it.
I just think that there's a lot of cases in the game where it turns out that we actually won't do stuff if there's not a reason that makes our characters better, unless it's like an actual prestige mode thing where it's like with the Mage Tower, it's like, oh, this is hard, worth progging, and the progression is its own reward. But if there's stuff in that kind of mid range, we would only touch those if there's power to push us there.
Yeah, but like there's been things in the past that like Brawler's Guild, that you had like these cool like fights going on, and I don't know if this in 2023 if it would be the same, but what I remember back in 2013 was that was just the most I'm old back in my day kind of shit, but like you'd be sitting in the Brawler's Guild with like other people and you would just watch them either succeed or fail, and it was like everyone was communing around this like thing. You'd see people get bruised, you would see people do like really, really hard bosses, and there was no like power reward from that. Like there was like a mount at the end, I think, and like some achievements, and a ton of people did Brawler's Guild, right? And that would be a perfect example of something that you should expect to see alongside every patch is some content like that, at least in my argument.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well, be the paradigm, because I do think the problem with stuff like Time Rifts is that it's not actually like fun. It's just kind of grindy and boring, but something like Brawler's Guild or Mage Tower or Visions every patch would be cool. Although, I do think that the question of like what rewards does this give, I guess if it's good cosmetics, that's enough for a lot of people, and if the content is fun enough, that's its own reward too, as I think Mage Tower has shown us too.
Good cosmetics will definitely be the right direction in terms of like having an allure to doing the content and then making the content fun afterwards, so that when people actually do it, they're like, wait, this is actually fun. I really like this, on top of like getting something out of it and feeling like they've accomplished a goal. But like my doomer side feels like there's no way they're gonna put super cool cosmetics into this, because I feel like they're probably gonna put cool cosmetics elsewhere.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I'd really want to see from the expansion other than pretty much what we've talked about. And do you guys have an idea of theme that you care about at all? I know there's been, I don't know if we really care about this, so maybe some people in the chat can actually give us their opinions, but like I remember when I was gone one weekend and somehow there was some theorizing that it was going to be a pirate expansion, and then like the president of Blizzard was like, it's not about pirates or something, but like you could see how much people reacted to that, and whether it would be negative or not. There's some feelings like, we don't want to go to another cosmic place, we want to like be back in Azeroth or whatever. Do you two care about that at all? And do you like care about the setting of the expansion, or is there anything else on like the aesthetic side that you really want to see?
Ooh, me personally, I absolutely would. I've mentioned this before. I thought Legion was cool as hell. As someone who played Warcraft 3 and was one of my favorite games of all time, I'm like somewhat attached to the old characters, you know, like Thrall, Tyrande, Malfurion, Illidan, Arthas, etc. Those guys. And to me, Dragonflight just did not hit. Like, look, I don't really care about the lore, right? I'm not really a lore Andy. I'm just an M+ player. But like, I still knew what was going on in Legion, and I bring this up every single time. Whenever Illidan was like, I am my scars, and he just like eye beams the freaking whatever the hell that thing's called. I was like, oh, I was pogging the hell out, man. I was off my chair. That was like so fucking cool. But like nowadays, I have no idea what's going on. Like, I'm sure some people are like interested in the story or the lore of the setting, but I have no idea what the hell is going on. Like, okay, there's this really bad dragon dude. He's Fyrak. He's mean. I don't know where he came from. And that's our enemy. And then for some reason we fought Sarkareth. I don't even know who he is. He's some Blizzard dude. Yeah, but that's my opinion. Like, I want to see something cool. Something that was like what we originally knew. Nothing too crazy. Doesn't have to be deep lore or anything. I just want to see cool shit.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I generally don't care, but I do think the whole like Dragonflight thing in general did not. There's a lot of really good things about Dragonflight. I think I've really enjoyed Dragonflight. Well, at least a lot of the raid content and stuff. I don't play a lot of the game, so maybe that tells you a lot. But I think the theme is something that overall has not majorly resonated. Like, I don't like, even like Shadowlands, when you go back and look at the amount of people who played the intro of Shadowlands, like Legion, the game was popping. BFA had a huge fall off, even though BFA in a lot of ways was very, very good. And then like Shadowlands had this massive thing before, or I guess it was during COVID, but you know, I think just maybe it was when it released, but like the type of content that Shadowlands looked like it was going to have was maybe alongside more of that like edgy Legion style like thing. And I think what you're saying is right. That might really sell. What do you think, Dratnos?
I have quite enjoyed the Dragonflight vibe. I've watched like a lot of the cinematics and stuff, and I feel like the villain building they've been doing with the like Iridikron has been pretty good. So I don't know, this story has been working for me. I've liked the change of pace, because it's tough to just keep raising the stakes every expansion, right? It's like, you know, in Legion, it's Sargeras is gonna stab his sword into the world and destroy that if you don't stop him, and then BFA comes around and like, oh no, there's an old god that's gonna take over the world and corrupt everybody with madness if we don't stop him. And then Shadowlands comes out and it's like, this guy's gonna unmake all of existence if we don't stop him. And Dragonflight comes out and it's like, yeah, there's some pretty bad dragons that are coming out of this vault, but you know, it's not the end of the world, right? Like, they're gonna do some bad stuff, and maybe that is gonna have a couple dominoes fall, and it could be the end of the world if we just leave them alone for a while. But
Yeah.
you know, it's hard. I think it's natural if they take that expansion to reset, that it does kind of feel less
It's more grounded.
epic. But I've liked it. I like the zones. I think let's see, the like Grizzly Hills callback in the Azure Span, love that place. The Onaran Plains, love that place. Waking Shores, all-time great zone, I think. So the vibe of this expansion's been immaculate.
Oh yeah,
for me.
but I think a lot of that had to do with I think Dragonriding has so positively affected the game in so many ways, and one of which is that they're able to make these vast zones, and I think they're really cool because of that. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. Remember how mad people got about, was it Revendreth in Shadowlands and you couldn't fly? Like, just imagine how brutal traversing these zones would have been if like Dragonriding didn't exist at all. I mean, it would be tragic. And like, that's kind of the whole point of like why Dragonriding was good for this, was the zone. It made the zone design just incredible.
But yeah, so to come back to the main question, I guess, of like, what am I hoping the vibe is next expansion or the setting? I wouldn't mind if they raise the stakes again. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff pointing towards it being, like a void themed or maybe like time Murazan themed thing, something like that. Either of those could be cool. I wouldn't mind it ramping up in intensity. I wouldn't have minded a pirate expansion either, though. I think that done well could be good. As long as they stay away from Alliance versus Horde again, I'm happy with any direction. And
really,
if they execute it well, I'm happy.
That's surprising. Yeah, for me personally, it's not about the stakes or the intensity, because like as much as like I kind of made it intense with like the whole like I am my scars thing, but like I personally just want to see what my characters that I knew, or the characters that I knew, right? Like for me personally, I just want to see more of what was Warcraft, not necessarily like.
It's tough though, because they've done all of those characters in an expansion by now, right? Like we've had Arthas, we've had Illidan twice, we've had
Does it really surprise you all that the writing has not been as captivating? Because like when you look at the way that popular television shows are made, people usually write like 1 or 2 seasons, and then they get their show approved, and then they spend those entire 2 seasons only focusing on the quality of it just to get hired for a 3rd season. And then once they get hired for the 3rd season, they haven't done any of that prep work. So they're doing it all at once, and clearly the quality goes down. I don't know if you guys have seen like CW shows. This is maybe low-hanging fruit.
Oh, yeah.
But like how much like the Flash and the Arrow fell off after like the first 2 seasons, it's exactly because of that. I think WoW that really applies to, and I don't know a single show that isn't extremely formulaic that has lasted like 10 plus seasons and it's like still just absolute top quality TV. It's not, I'm talking like Breaking Bad tier banger like TV, it's like usually formulaic stuff. So WoW is kind of similar to that, right? They went into WoW knowing pretty much the story they were going to tell through Wrath, through the Warcraft games, and the lore that existed before that. And then as soon as they started going past that, it seems like a lot of those TV shows where they're kind of just figuring it out. And man, we're just like 10 plus years into that. I don't expect a lot from the story to captivate you because you can only go so far, right? And you mentioned like there needs to be stakes, but at the same time, if the stakes every expansion are stop this bad guy before the entire world gets destroyed, that's the same like, comic book trash that you just can't keep doing that. It's like it makes those events seem insignificant, right? So I don't really care as much about the lore in general, and I think that's a big reason why. It's just kind of seemed mid to me forever, but sounds like some people enjoy the Dragonflight thing, and I don't know if you can ever like. Does it seem possible to you right now, either of you, that they can write any expansion that captivates people as much as the Lich King did as the primary antagonist in Wrath? There's no way, right? There's no way. So because there was just too much before that writing on that, and it's also a different time. So I don't know what to expect from the story, basically.
Yeah, it's like trying to have a new Lord of the Rings, or like trying to have I don't even know, like what's like something that's been done a long time ago and it's ended. Like you can't really have a continuation. So I fully agree with that.
I think maybe Sargeras could be it. Like whenever,
that's true. Yeah, we never really touched on that.
Like he's him and Illidan are off fighting in the space somewhere or something. So at some point it'll be long enough since Legion that they can go back to that. But I don't know. Even there, I think hitting Wrath of the Lich King's thematic intensity again is going to be, or like resonance again with the player base is going to be impossible pretty much. Can we just quickly though shout out the Flash for they just like they killed off one of their characters and then they were like, you know what, that actor was actually pretty good, and they just brought him back playing a different character. And it's actually like that was badass. I just want to say that was a bold move, and I respect it. And I think if WoW just did that and had like literal Illidan's model walk back in, but like with a different name, played by the same voice actor but a different personality, that would take a lot of gumption out of them. And
there's no way, dude. People be so mad. Dude, I swear, if you guys ever want, so by the way, in parentheses, don't do this, but if you ever want to have like a fever dream, just watch like the first 2 seasons of The Flash. Genuinely pretty good TV actually for like CW production quality. And then like don't watch seasons whatever, and end up in like season 6 or something. And I remember kind of just looking up at one point after watching it due to sunk cost fallacy, and then I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? Like the villains have just been like so ridiculous. Like the Mind guy, I don't know if you guys remember that season, but just like how did we get to this point?
It's not good.
He's a big Flash fan. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Anyways, I think we pretty much talked through this. We'll obviously have massive amounts to go over after the actual BlizzCon announcement because we can kind of now discuss the direction they chose to go after discussing it. Do you guys have anything else on the expansion topic before we get into the Patreon question?
Oh yeah, remove target cap, remove raid buffs, or at the very least bring back BFA drums and scrolls. God, if they just do these things. What else was there? Remove GCD off. Like, why did they make these changes? GCD on defensives or like specific abilities? Like, what has GCD? Is it Ice Block? I can't remember off the top of my head. For like tanks, it's like
buff mage defensives.
Frenzied
They
regen.
need some help.
Okay, well let's not go down that far, but we need to remove GCDs off of a lot of these stupid abilities that shouldn't have GCDs. And also, goddamn target capping, man. Target capping is the bane of my existence.
Yeah, target capping was never done right. Like, I think target capping, in general, made sense if they did it right, which is like, okay, if someone's uncapped and then someone else is capped at 5 targets or 3 targets or 8 targets, the person who is capped at 5, because of like all the different kind of damage types in this game, all the different kind of target counts you can be hitting, and with 39 specs, you have like a bunch of different ways to do damage. It would make sense that you have, let's say, Ellie Shaman, Chain Lightning is their main damage again, or Earthquake is capped to 5 targets. They would have to absolutely destroy an uncapped AoE class on 5 targets. That's the only way it makes sense, and it actually would be good design if they accomplish that. The issue is that every uncapped AoE class destroys 5 target classes that are capped at 5 targets, right? So it's like, they never actually achieved it, and you can just say, okay, we kind of failed at that, and you can go back to something that's a little, because like, the reality is in Raid, there's like 1 to 5 targets constantly. Randomly, there's like mass AoE. But in Dungeons, it just always ends up being mass AoE. And if you're not specifically good at that, if you uncapped more classes, it would just be more realistic for more classes to be meta in Dungeons at any point in the expansion. Or let's forget about meta, viable or playable at a high key. If that makes sense. But yeah, I think that makes sense. The whole raid buff thing is interesting. I personally would like there to be 0 raid buffs just because, just fully my opinion, like for what I love about the game, I like making comps and I think that's a fun way to strategize for raid and I like obsess about it and I think it's literally the thing I like the most about this. And it has become like pick a couple of classes instead of pick an entire 20-man raid. I do want to caution people against the removal of raid buffs in general though, because it would just be something else. If there was no raid buffs, you would just stack classes that have unbelievable utility. If they homogenized utility, you would just stack the classes that did the most damage, but it would certainly be a little bit better. At least right now, it kind of forces diversity with a lot of teams. But in Mythic Plus, the raid buffs aren't really balanced to where, like, you don't really care necessarily about having a physical damage increase in your group, but, like, you'd be crazy to not have Mark of the Wilds. Like, that's its own thing, and, like, Lust and Battle Res and stuff like that. I just want to say I would be for them doing it. For sure, but I don't know if it would be as big of a fix as a lot of people think. But one thing for sure is bring back the drums and the scrolls. I mean, there was just absolutely no way that it made sense to really remove those. But if you look at the timeline of WoW, they actually did this in the past. Like right now is probably the most aggressive they've ever gone, besides maybe BC, about like class and spec utility and like raid buffs and things they bring. And they've gone through this cycle almost 3 full times now, and I think it's about to happen again, where they go hard into raid buffs and then they just completely remove them. And I think if you look at the cycle, it would be right around next expansion that they are removed. So again, that's total like just making shit up. Like I don't know if that'll happen because you're seeing them actively in this moment continue to double down. But if you were to like replay it over again, it's usually like they remove them one expansion, and then the next expansion they go little by little. It's extreme, and then they remove it. It's happened twice, so maybe that'll happen again. Hopefully.
Max confirmed it here. They are removing raid buffs for next patch, according to the calendar cycle.
Yeah. And I think that was pretty much it. Mass AoE cap, stuff like that. Wait, what GCDs do you mean? Like, give me an example.
Like Frenzied Regeneration, obviously needs to go off the GCD. Celestial Brew. Some defensives that DPS have. I don't remember if Bubble's on the GCD. They may have removed that. Ice Block maybe was on GCD.
So you just want all defense? I think some being on the GCD kind of makes sense. But the tank ones are weird. Because, like, if you're going to have tank things for some classes, like Ignore Pain, I mean, God bless. You remember when that was on the GCD?
Yep.
For that short amount of time? But, like you should. I mean, frenzied regen follows the exact same logic. I think the thing with Blizzard, and you saw them do this, where they added all the offensive cooldowns to the global and BFA, I think it was, and they removed it after. Was they wanted to like basically lower the gap between the extremely experienced longtime player and the new player. WoW has a big getting new players into the game problem, so they wanted to kind of simplify it. But then they got horrible feedback to that. So yeah, I mean, Fired Up has been screaming about this for ages, to take like random things like the mage barrier off the GCD and stuff like that just feels terrible. So I think them looking at that would be good for sure. But I don't think everything, like I'm just reading through chat. There's just like all of those buttons don't need to be. It's like taken a little too far. Like I just think like they did take a look at it, but not just every single button that isn't rotational needs to be off the GCD.
Yeah, it's just like basically the ones that feel bad. Like when you think of Paladin, for example, like what feels bad to press? Consecration. Like it's kind of annoying having to like place you consecrate and it costs a global.
Yeah, that one's rotational though, which I think that one's just like a more underlying issue of consecration is not a fun button.
That's true too.
Dude.
Yeah,
I have a tier list that is just showing classes' happiness level going into the new patch, and I have made the objective decision to just continue moving Prop Pally down that list in happiness 1 tier per week, even though they're fine next patch, just until they change the gameplay. I think one of the biggest egregious bad class design decisions in the entire game, and I truly mean this, is Prop Paladins having to be in their Consecrate for the amount of power it gives them. It is absolutely horrible. So yeah, I definitely hope they look at that.
Dude, Horse used to be on a GCD, whatever it's called, Divine Steed, and them removing that off the GCD felt infinitely better. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think they could take a couple more of those like defensive and utility buttons off GCD. I do think major offensives, it's better that we're not like pressing a macro to pop 5 CDs at once. And I think they've done a pretty good job of making it so that most offensives don't feel as bad as they did in like early BFA or whatever to press, because like most of them now do something when you press them, which is fun. So I think they've done a good job there, but I do think they could ease up a little bit on a few of the defensive and utility options.
Yeah, the offensive ones have honestly felt not too bad. Like at first it was bad, but it's honestly kind of gone to the point where like you can feel it. Like it feels meaningful, and it's not you just mashing a macro that hits every single offensive ability. Although there are some that kind of miss. Like Unholy DK is still a little bit intense on the amount of GCDs as an opener, and I know that's a pretty common complaint. But that's like 1 in 10 specs maybe.
All right, it is time. Dratnos, would you like to introduce us to this week's Patreon question? And just a quick shout out to our Patreon. I don't know if, actually, do we have a little slide we can show for that just to kind of advertise it again since it's the second week?
Yeah, Fronk, pull up the Patreon slide. Come on. Oh, he's so unprepared for this.
Guys, Fronk is so bad at this. I hate to break it to you.
Shout out to Fronk though for not DCing us yet.
Yep, no DCs today.
That's good. All right, well, I'll read out the Patreon question that we've got here, which is from Anonymous. I've been playing the game since launch, but only seriously raiding since Shadowlands. I've gotten AOTC every patch, and I'm trying to improve enough to get into a cutting-edge guild, but I'm finding my damage really falls off in Mythic Raid. I think primarily because I'm prioritizing living over damage and maybe being overcautious. My instinct is to practice the fights, but unlike M+, where you can spam the same dungeon, or Heroic Raid where you can re-clear for no loot, there's no way to practice a Mythic Raid boss. And if we're keeping our lockout to prog another boss, I may not see those early bosses again for weeks. Aside from doing my rotation on a training dummy, what can I do to practice and up my game? Do you have any active practice? I assume this means like advice, sir. Or do you do any active practice? Okay, I see. And then TLDR, how can I get better at Mythic Raid damage / mechanics? This is something that all three of us have talked about this or related topics before, but I think it's a really good one. There's a lot of
excellent
stuff here.
Question. Yeah, so we should probably spend our time on it and make sure it's fully. So I have like a little graph to show, but I'm not going to do it now. If you want to kind of go into it, Dratnos and Dorki, and give your initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, Dorki,
Okay,
you want to
so
take first swing? Good.
the first thing I would like to say is you want to be playing the game constantly if you want to be improving. And you don't have to be improving just in Mythic Raid, in the encounter. You want to just improve on playing your character and just being better at controlling your character, being better at the game itself. It's like that one Bruce Lee thing. Was it Bruce Lee? Somebody. I fear not of a man who has practiced 1,000 kicks once, but I fear a man who has practiced one kick 1,000 times. You know that saying? Like, you want to be extremely good at playing your character. You want to be so in tune that you don't have to think about your rotation. You don't want to be staring at your rotation. You want to just be able to get in there and, like, as you're doing the encounter, you should be able to comfortably play the fight out. It's like whenever I talk about cognitive overload, you don't want to have to spend your brain power on trying to focus on playing your character. You want to be focused on playing the fight, and it should just come natural. And so, what does this mean? I mean, I want players to be able to do M+, do heroic raid. That's at least how I improved as a player, especially back in Legion. Like, back in Legion, I actually cared a lot about raid logs. I used to, like, farm heroic raids every single week just to go for, like, 99 and 100s. And, like, nowadays I don't really care, but, like, that's what I did back then. Back then I would just go into heroic, even if it didn't drop any loot. I would literally just go in there to try to parse and to try to farm logs and just, like, figure out how you can optimize damage, how you can min-max. Same for playing M+ too. Like, if you just play a lot of M+, you understand how to do AoE better, you understand how to do single target better, understand prio damage, understand how to survive. I think all that is the key to being better in Mythic Raid, even if you're not doing the Mythic Raid encounter itself.
So,
yeah. Oh, good.
You mentioned something, Dorky, about, like, you used to do heroic logs. That's because before Mythic Plus became a thing, it was absolutely the way to get better was you just spammed raid, right? Even before Legion, like, it was like a bar to push. Like, every really, really insane player that has ever played here at one point was an absolute parse demon. They just pushed themselves as hard as they could, and they were good enough at the game to be alive, and they just wanted to do as much damage as possible because that was, like, the way to push yourself. That was the rating you could push. I guess Warcraft logs, All-Stars rating, or Pro Raiders at the time for the giga old people. And then Mythic Plus came out, and it was another way to apply yourself and kind of push in another way. There's some comp restrictions there, but doing Mythic Plus is now, I think, the way that people get better at rating, because doing Mythic Plus and doing it on higher difficulties especially is the best way to just spam PvE, because all of us are going to give you a nuanced answer, but the real answer is you just play the game more. Really, you just play the game and apply yourself more. You're, like, hitting dummies, so that shows that you care, but you just have to play the shit out of the game. Everyone that was sick at the game just has done that at some point. So Fronk, actually swap over to my thing now. This will be really quick. But, like, you have basically like a bar for your, let's just say this bar is your WoW skill. How you choose to fill it, or I guess your awareness or your Coggy load, as Dorky called it. You know, let's say you could split it 50-50 mechanics and awareness. You're saying you struggle with awareness in the raid. That's because maybe you only have so much to go here, right? And then you guys have all played with the player that does this, right? Where the left side is damage and the other side is mechanics. You know, your Gromnax of the world. Shout out Grom. You know, where, like, where like this is, they're just all about damage, and then, like, sometimes they'll feed to things, but sometimes this is valuable because if they feed enough on an encounter, you know, you'll eventually have someone who's, like, good enough at damage to actually kill the boss. A lot of lower ranked guilds struggle with damage, right? And then you have players in your guild that absolutely, like, gray parse, right? And that's because they're not really worried about their damage. They just want to make sure above everything else that they just want to focus on awareness, right? So they're just awareness is on the left or awareness is on the right and damage is on the left. The only way you can make this better, you can maybe try to, most players are the way they are. You just either care a little bit more about awareness and your mechanics or damage. But the only way to do this is just to play more. The more you play, the more you just increase your bar at all. You just make this, the best players just have more. Sometimes fights require this much mechanics, or they require, you know, this much, right? Some fights are way easier than others, and it'll affect your damage in some ways, but there is no way to spam Mythic, but you don't really need to. You just need to spam play the game. If you're doing dungeons and you're doing the most damage possible and you are, like, not dying to things and you feel in control of your survivability, then you will be better at that when it comes to raid. A lot of the skill difference, the skill base between dungeons and raids is exactly the same. The knowledge base is different, but it's just Mythic Plus is just being able to endlessly do challenging PvE content, even though it's a little bit more repetitive. But that's you just have to spam the shit out of the game. That's it.
Yeah, I definitely think of this sort of problem in terms of the brain power that's coming in and how you're going to budget your brain power and how you're going to find good ways to improve that. Now, obviously, I think you both have mentioned playing a lot, and that is sort of the way of you're going to try and make it so that your rotation uses less of your brain power, right? The other thing to potentially target here is, do you want the boss mechanics to take up less of your brain power? And so some of that can be good UI choices, good weak aura choices, going in and thinking like, hey, look, what if I just get a timer weak aura that tells me, at 50 seconds on this fight, especially if you're in a guild that's extending to progress a certain boss at this point in the tier, there's a lot of resources available to you that can tell you exactly what's going on that boss fight. And that can be used both defensively and actually offensively too. You can look at that and you can, instead of maybe trying to make some rotational decisions on the fly, you can actually look through the top logs for your spec and you can be like, okay, people are pressing army at 0 and at 237 and at 556, and I'm going to do that as well, and I'm going to get a weak aura, and I'm going to get a timer weak aura that will give me a warning at those times to press those cooldowns, and that offloads some of your brain power into a UI instead of into something that your brain's going to have to do, which obviously the ideal world, it would be great if you could expand your brain, and of course the practice is the best way to try and make that happen. But if you're talking about already practicing on heroic for no loot and hitting a training dummy, there's a good chance you already are practicing a lot and you might be looking for a way to sort of offload some of that thinking. The other thing is, if you feel like your damage is falling off and you're over prioritizing living instead of damage, try prioritizing damage more. Like if you find yourself in a raid night never dying or being in danger and also never doing good damage and just like being out 10 seconds early for a mechanic, try and play it a little bit more dangerous. You gotta play it a little bit faster and looser if you're trying to do mythic progression. You can't just run away from the boss and expect it to die of old age. That doesn't happen. So you gotta, at some point, the risk taking or calculated risk. It doesn't have to be, obviously you don't want to become the other extreme of this, and in many ways a raider who dies 0 times over the course of a night is going to be way more valuable in late progression if the damage checks aren't going to be close. But if your damage is really falling off, I think that there are a lot of people who play like that would benefit from it is a different kind of lazy play to just always run out at the start of every cast and to not kind of try and learn how many globals you can get before you run out.
Yeah.
And you got to, at some point, get out of your comfort zone one way or the other.
Yeah, I think you touched on something that's really important, and you mentioned sound. So not only can you use sound to help you so much, but I think a lot of people sound griefs them. Like, I don't know if bigwigs and DBMs still do this, but for the longest time when you downloaded base bigwigs and you updated it before a patch, it'll do like these little bings and bongs for every single mechanic, and you're actually teaching yourself that no sound you're hearing matters. So like the way you want to do it, and hopefully it's like this where they're all disabled by default, is you want to find a very specific mechanic on a fight that you're struggling with particularly and use a very specific sound for that, so you can have your own way of listening to that on your, like, that isn't like anything else, and you will just be more aware of it. And also good raid leading matters too. Like a lot of you guys have probably dealt with this, but like that is the perfect audio aid. Like if you have an absolute like really, really good, consistent, importantly, raid leader, that will help you a lot too. But if you notice that you're in a guild where the raid leading isn't as aggressive, you need to kind of do those audio things on your own to make you better. But just bringing it back to what he was saying, it's just about doing things in repetition, right? You mentioned hitting a dummy. Well, if you log on a new class and you do a rotation one time and then you go into a dungeon, you're probably going to spend the majority of that dungeon thinking about that rotation. But if you've just done that rotation 1,000 times or 10,000 times, then you're going to be paying way more. It's just going to be second nature, and you're going to be paying way more attention to everything around you. So it's just simply practice, repetition, playing the game, and trying to do that rotation while doing challenging content to where you just, your brain just enlarges over time and gets a lot of wrinkles in it, and you get a lot better.
Yeah, so to touch on what Dratnos said, I thought he made a really good point about making weak auras to remind you of when to press stuff. One thing that also helps a lot is recording your gameplay and looking at logs, learning how to read logs. Like this is a skill that every single high-level M+ player, or not M+ player, PvE player needs to understand. if you're trying to figure out how to do good damage on a boss fight, especially if you're a CD-oriented class, you should try to look at the top logs of your spec and look at when they press their CDs. When do they army? Are they armying 3 minutes into the fight, 4 minutes into the fight, 7 minutes into the fight? Where are they using their 45-second CDs?
And then also think about why, and like try to think why they did that, so you can make.
When is that happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're recording your gameplay, you can look back at your gameplay, whether it's like through a Twitch VOD or Shadowplay, whatever people use. Doesn't matter what you use. Just try to figure out when are your timings, where are you screwing up, how are other players playing, and then try to mimic them. I would say, like, honestly, almost like carbon copy how some of the top logs play. But I mean, it sort of depends on their guild strat. It depends on how their fight lengths are. But try to copy it and then see, like, so, like, where should I use my CDs? How do I adjust? Maybe our boss dies a little bit longer than their fight because, you know, maybe they're a better guild. And in that case, then maybe you want to extend your CDs a little bit, hold on to your CDs a little bit longer so that you can optimize for, like, a specific phase or whatever. Just learn to read logs. With TLDR, learn to read logs. Record yourself, make weak auras.
Play the shit out of the game. Every single player that owns right now and is at the top of WoW PvE has just played this game at an obsessive level for 16 hours a day for years at some point, and either scaled it back or are still actively doing that. It's really that simple. You just have to. And then I guess there's some level of being innately better at games. Like, some people are naturally just better at everything in life, right? And some of that can be due to video games, right? So, like, some people may progress faster than others. But yeah, I mean, you know, just play the game and care about playing the game. And like you said, if you're not just looking at logs, but you're watching recordings of yourself, you're doing the due diligence of, like, most of the time you'll be able to watch yourself, and even at the best players will find one thing they did and just be like, ah, man, I didn't really like doing that. But that helps, right? So yeah, play the game a lot, care about what you're doing, watch what better players do, and get better. Also, playing with good players matters too. I'm not know if that's like a guild hopping suggestion, but I think, like,
Goddamn, just leave your guild.
I mean, yeah, definitely don't leave your guild, but, like, I think playing around great players makes you better too. But yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I'm kind of reading between the lines here, but I kind of get the vibe that this person may have joined a guild that was more progressed than they were, and may have gone and done bosses that they hadn't done yet.
Dratnos. Look, the guy's just trying to live.
No, I think he's right.
No, which brings me to my point, which is not to flame, but is to say that if you ever are in that situation where you join a guild that's like 7 out of 9 Mythic, and you've never done Mythic Rashok, and you go in and do Mythic Rashok with them, it's also just normal to suck. Like, they have 100 pulls on that boss, you have 0. You're going to suck on it for several pulls. So.
I think I saw the most extreme version of this. So before people did the map weak auras on Echo of Neltharion, there was the, like, list weak aura where the people who had the really hard job were the ranged DPS that could have been 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, right? And that was, for our list, that was usually Locks and Moonkins, or Locks and Druids. And we had THD come in 1 week after progression, because, you know, and THD is just an absolute warlord game. Like, he is as good as anyone who plays WoW. And he was just getting absolutely farmed. Because that's just, if you guys have done Echo of Neltharion, it's such a very specific kind of thing you have to learn. And specifically, the people who can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have to memorize 5 different positions before there was map weak auras. So, like, it was just doomed to fail. I think he was dead every single pull, and he had no chance. So that's, like, that is a, like, a microcosm of what can happen to you in any guild. If you are ever doing a boss that someone else has done 100+ times and you're doing it for the first time, the expectation of you doing it perfectly is extremely like, there's no way that you'll do that.
Yeah, it's actually true. You are doomed to fail.
I think that people in the highest guilds have a pretty good understanding of that, but I've actually seen people get, like, flamed in lower guilds. People are like, oh yeah, this new recruit's bad. But it's like, no, dude, it's their first week
Trial
and they've never
and shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, come on.
True.
To anybody out there, like, this is an effect that is, I guarantee you, it's stronger than you think. People look so bad on their first pull when you've done 100 pulls of a boss, and you just have to try and remind yourself that that's normal.
Yep. All right, I think that was a very in-depth answer. I hope for the future Patreon questions that we are as in-depth as that one. All right, cool. All right, so Dorki, you brought us in today. Would you like to bring us out, or is there anything we need to shout out before next week? I think next week the episode's gonna be on a different day.
Yeah, because Fronk he's flying out on Wednesday. I don't know. He's just always a problem.
Yeah.
We're sorry about him, but he's making things tough for us. But yeah, we'll find a different day, and we'll do one next week for what M plus look ahead at the next patch. So that should be pretty cool. But yeah, Dorky, I think you can definitely take us out.
Yeah, so thank you all very much for listening to episode 2 of the podcast, PoddyC. Seems like next week will probably be Monday or Tuesday with a very special guest. We're not going to disclose his name. It's some tank guy, I think. Probably. And that is it. Yeah. Very cool.
All right. Very good. All right. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.